Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey, here once again with another video on The Flash Season 4, and this is going to be my review for episode 18 of this season, otherwise entitled Lose Yourself. But of course, before we get into the rest of the video, spoilers, and yes, there's big spoilers in this episode for a couple of reasons. So, don't continue if you haven't watched the episode yet. But if you are continuing on because you've watched the episode, be sure to let me know in the comment section down below your various opinions on this episode in the comment section down below, as well as being sure to drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it and subscribing to the channel if you're new. So last episode we met Null, who is the second last bus matter we had to sort of deal with. And it was also a big episode for Ralph where we learned, the reason why he was doing certain things throughout the season and a bit of his backstory as well. So that's the main thing going into this episode, I guess. And we also, learned that Marley's is on a loop, essentially, caused by the Thinker, thanks to Brainstorm's abilities and the Weeper's tears. But that really isn't brought up this episode, so we don't really need to mention that, I guess. But essentially, we start this episode off with Ralph and Barry going to the 405 bus, which is the bus that, all the metahumans were on when Barry came out of the Speed Force and gave them more powers and stuff like that. So we go there to basically look for signs of dark matter to sort of get some details on Edwin Gauss, because we knew who he was, who the last boss matter was. We just needed to know where he was, essentially. We knew who he was, but where was he? So we went there and you basically see an outline of a guy who, as if he just disappeared. That was his last known whereabouts was on the bus, because just the outline, I guess, of him with dark matter. But it is during this sort of thing where we learned that Ralph is basically, one of his plans essentially, or his plan is to kill DeVoe. That's what he sees as the outcome or the finish line of this whole debacle, if you want to call it, or this whole journey, is DeVoe dying. That's what he thinks is going to happen or should happen, just because of the scale of DeVoe. And this really comes to a head later on in the episode, which we will talk about. Had some issues with that. I think this episode was, top 3 this season. And there's nothing wrong with the actual episode itself. It's just more maybe characters, but we'll get into that when it's appropriate, I guess. But speaking of Edwin Gauss, we do meet him. He's a hippie dude. He's otherwise known as a folded man in the comics, but that doesn't really translate to TV that well, so we hear it once or twice. I think they actually call him the folded man, but for the most part, just, Edwin or Edwin Gauss. He's a hippie dude. He was on Fear the Walking Dead, that actor, so some of you might recognize him from that show. But essentially, his ability is he can access pocket dimensions. So in the comics, it's a bit different. He can access the second and fourth dimension. It's different in the comics. So they've changed his abilities for the show, which I think makes sense. Those abilities wouldn't have really made sense for the show, or at least this season. So him able to enter pocket dimensions and stuff makes much more sense in regards to what's happening this season. So I thought that was a good change. But one of the tools that we see used in this episode, we did see it in the trailer for this week, is basically a big tuning fork. It's basically a tuning fork, but a tuning fork on top of a tuning fork on top of a tuning fork on top of a tuning fork. It's just a 20 million tuning forks put together, and he's calling it the Sonic Scepter. I think that's what he was calling it, but it's essentially big tuning fork or Sonic fork, whatever you want to call it. But Harry, throughout that scene especially, was just acting weird, as if almost as if he was on drugs, or he's had 27 million cups he was acting like H.R. Wells, but to the extreme, as if he's had 27 cups of coffee, double shot coffees in the morning. So Harry was acting extremely weird, and it wasn't vague at all. Everyone was picking up on it. We do find out that Killer Frost and Caitlin are essentially talking to each other through leaving notes, which I think is a cool concept. But they're doing it off screen. I hate when they're doing that. And Killer Frost is a character where they should push some other stuff off screen and have that on screen. I can't fathom them or why they did that. Why would they put that stuff off screen? It just one of the big complaints this season is that Killer Frost is essentially getting sidelined for a character that is arguably one of the cooler characters on the show, and they're sidelining a lot of her story. So why were they doing that? I find that it wasn't a big. I wasn't really triggered at it. I was just a bit confused as to why they would do that. I know there's time restraints on an episode, but you could have done that, in one of the previous episodes. That could have been a sideline, maybe the Run Iris Run episode or something like that. It feels weird that they would just put that off screen, but anyway. But it should really come as no surprise that the thinking cap is basically like a drug to Harry. He's obsessed with it. He's addicted to it. He's addicted to its power, essentially. Power is an addiction. And the thinking cap does give him intelligence, which in most cases does equal power. So Harry is just getting addicted to this. Joe is the one that's getting the most suspicious about it, or at least, investigating it deeper. But Cisco's also there as well. But yeah, it's not even once again, Harry's not even being sort of vague or trying to be subtle with it. He's just obviously addicted to this thing, hugging it as if he's holding, his last $10 or something like that. He's just really possessive of this thinking cap and addicted to it. But on the search for the folded man, like that whole scene was like, it was pretty funny, I guess, going into the woods, and there was just like this hippie establishment, if you want to call it. I don't know if like the actual like the central city would allow that. I'm not too sure. I think in Australia you can't do that in certain areas. But anyway, I know it's like in America, at least. But we go in there and we come across the samurai, and Caitlin is stabbed, which I thought was interesting. But I think that was all set up for a later thing, later on in the episode, essentially. But the whole thing was essentially like DeVoe trying to split the team, leading up to what was going to happen at the end of the episode. So you can understand why certain points were happening throughout the episode, I guess. But one of the big revelations, I guess, is that Edwin, after, getting him into Star Labs and stuff, is that he actually can get into DeVoe's lair. Like, he remembers actually, like, going in there, essentially, and seeing the dude with the wires on his head and in the chair and stuff, and the lady in the white jacket with the hot accent, I think that's what he said. So he can get in there, so that's pretty handy. But this does essentially lead to a whole confrontation between Barry and Ralph, as Ralph is, like, the one that finds us out about Edwin Gauss. So he's going to use that ability to go into DeVoe's lair himself, which I thought was a bit of a strange move. But once you get the conversation later on, which we will touch on, you understand why Ralph was doing that. But we do get another confrontation. There's basically two, I guess, big confrontations in regards to like inter-Star Lab stuff. Then we get Harry versus Cisco and Joe, and like Harry is like going off as if he's like suffering like withdrawal symptoms. That's basically what he was suffering, and when he attacks Cisco because he thinks Cisco's taking his thinking cap, and Joe comes in and is like, look, there's obviously something wrong with you. So look, Harry's story for the rest of the season is going to be a very interesting one to follow and where it leads, because, it seems to be escalating pretty damn quick, and to the point where it seems like something is definitely going to be different with Harry. But that conversation between Ralph and Barry was great. I really loved that conversation. It basically was sort of explained what Ralph was doing earlier in the episode, and also sets up what Ralph does later in the episode as well. It was definitely one of Ralph's better scenes, or if not his best scene throughout the whole season. And just, it made Barry stand back and realize that essentially he doesn't know what a person's doing all the time. Barry isn't always right. Barry doesn't always know what a certain person's thinking and what they're doing, which I will talk about later in the episode, which was one of my issues with the characters in this episode rather than the actual story. But yeah, that scene between Barry and Ralph was a really good one, and I think we'll carry on with Barry for the rest of the season, or at least the next couple of episodes. But essentially the big sort of scene begins as we see Barry, Caitlin and Cisco use Edwin Gauss's abilities. He opens up the little pocket dimension entry point, and they go to DeVoe's lair, and it's all a trap, as it's a hologram, as a lot of people were sort of predicting, or maybe not a lot, but a decent amount of people were predicting that in my trailer breakdown, that this was going to happen. And then we see the real DeVoe and the real Marlies, or mechanic, come into Star Labs, use the kill goal, basically control everything. There's a samurai coming in as well. And yeah, this is basically where, to use a colloquial term, shit hits the fan. So we see DeVoe as Izzy actually get the powers of Melting Point as well as Null. We do see him on the ground. I was in my Discord live chat during this. Some people didn't pick up on that. It's a really quick fade, but you do see Izzy's body on the ground, Null's body on the ground, and Melting Point's body on the ground. And then you see like Edwin Gauss come up, and DeVoe's taken over his body. And it's like during this entire sort of thing that we do see Harry run to the time vault, and essentially ask Gideon to up the dark matter and just keep increasing the input of dark matter into his thinking cap to the point where it just overloads, and Harry is just passed out. So that's going to pick up next episode as well. But this is when we get the scene, which I think we all knew was coming. I was saying it in my trailer breakdown for a couple of weeks, essentially. I was saying this was going to be the episode where Ralph was taken, where Ralph died, if you want to call it. Look, it was pretty sad as well, and it all comes back to right at the beginning of the episode with Ralph and Barry's conversation on the bus. Essentially what Ralph was saying was that basically it would have got to the point where he might have had to kill DeVoe. And, Barry said, look, it's not self-defense. Ralph used the point I'm just defending myself if I kill him back. And Barry's point is, well, it's not self-defense if you're thinking beforehand. Yeah, I guess morally it's not. But the point is, if a person is so undefeatable to a point where you don't know how you're going to defeat them, they come at you attacking your life. I think even if you were thinking beforehand and you still kill them in the process, I still think it's self-defense. And even if it isn't, I think in that situation it's still the right thing to do. The issue I had with this episode in regards to the characters is that they wrote Barry, mainly Barry, because I think he was one of the more, because really the ones that were really in the whole thing were Barry and Iris for the most part. And I guess you could argue Joe, but mainly Barry and Iris. they write Barry as so stubborn and so, dumb. They write Barry in a really dumb way. And it gets to the point where you're just thinking, like, how does this guy even, like, how is this guy, like, 4 seasons into a show without getting, like, seriously injured or dying himself? Because Ralph was right. And it was just really, I guess, all of Team Flash and their stubbornness and the ability not to adapt to what was in front of them that got Ralph killed. Ralph was right the entire time. Ralph was the smarter one. I know that sounds crazy, like, Paige, are you sure you're saying the right thing? Ralph was the smarter one the entire episode. He was right the entire time. He knew what had to happen. In that situation, DeVoe should have been killed. DeVoe should have been killed, and look what's happened afterwards. Ralph is taken by DeVoe. You know, it's not like his powers, but DeVoe actually goes into his body because of Ralph's abilities, I guess you could say, where the Thinker's expanding mind and stuff won't damage Ralph's body. So with the Flash, he could have been in his body, and the same thing would have been the case. You know, the rejuvenating cells and stuff would have countered what his expanding mind was doing. But so does Ralph's. So Ralph and Barry have like similar abilities in regards to that. But it isn't just Ralph's abilities that DeVoe gets in his body. He actually also gets Killer Frost's powers. So I don't know if that's actually established in this episode. I don't think we actually see him use Killer Frost's abilities. It's just established when Caitlin's like, well, my body feels weird. And they look at her and she has no dark matter through her. So she's lost her abilities. DeVoe's got them. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens there, I guess. So Caitlin is just Caitlin for the rest of the season until maybe the finale. We'll have to wait and see, unless they can, I don't know how they're going to reverse that, but going to be interesting to see what happens there. So it's just Caitlin from now on, no more Killer Frost. Now, one of the down parts of the episode definitely was Barry cleaning out Ralph's office. It was pretty sad, just like the music and the way it was shot and stuff. And I think it was Barry just reflecting on Ralph, what he had said throughout the episode, how much he had changed, and basically, I guess you could argue almost like the borderline sacrifice he made. So it's going to be, as I said earlier, it's going to be interesting to see how that carries on with Barry, mainly in the next handful of episodes, because it's like the hangover, if you want to call it, of Ralph going and how he's adapting to it. And like, he might change his attitude to the whole thing. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens there. But this all leads into us actually seeing the original DeVoe come back, because Ralph's abilities where he can change his face and stuff. And he's actually taken dark matter from Harry Wells. He's actually got the dark matter, so like a little canister, if you want to call it, of dark matter, and he's going to use it to sort of start the Enlightenment, which we all knew. We're wondering when it was going to come back. It was mentioned a handful of times in previous episodes, but this seems like it's going to be the kicking off point of DeVoe's major plan, and it looked like a satellite essentially, so I'm guessing it's just going to spread like particles or something, or like a ray or a beam or something, and just broaden everyone's minds, and that's the Enlightenment. So obviously they're going to expand on that in the next couple of episodes, I guess, but at least they planted the seed there. But overall, I really enjoyed this episode. It was definitely one of the better episodes of the season. Top 3, probably like episode 7 and 15 are probably the ones above it, maybe. I guess it just depends on personal taste, but I really enjoyed watching this episode. As I said, the only frustrating thing was just the stubbornness of Team Flash and their inability to change what's in front of them. You're not versing Zoom, you're not versing Sabotage, you're not versing Reverse Flash. It's a different villain, you know? It just felt weird that you have all these smart people and they don't have the ability to change and adapt to what's in front of them. It was just really stubborn, and I found that really stupid. And they just make Barry look like he's got the IQ. As I said on Twitter, I think he had the IQ of an eggplant, because Barry never thinks. Barry never thinks. He does really stupid things. So hopefully, the episodes to come, Barry starts to think, and he's written a bit better. But yeah, enjoyed the episode. It was just that like little issue that I had there. But thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, it'd be awesome if you could drop a like on it. Let me know in the comment section down below your various opinions on the episode. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new, and here's a little video presentation in memory of our friend Ralph Dibny. So I'll see you later, guys. Goodbye.